Hey, welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write and I talk about movies, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critiques Association.
My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Critiques Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
And my name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
Yeah, you are.
You also apparently didn't get the memo that we changed the name to the Boston Online Film Critiques Association.
I ignored that memo.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
I'm no
it only
fun.
came from the top, whatever.
Sanctions.
I knew if I said it the way you guys did, I would bust out laughing and I wouldn't be able to finish anything.
Well, yeah.
So I was like, I just got to plow ahead with my intro the way it is.
Right, because then you would have to clear the hurdle of Gallica. So you're going like, how if you're already in a giggling fit, how are you going to get through that second really long?
Right?
Yeah.
It's a tongue twister for me for some reason. But yes, Boston Online Film Critiques Association.
Yeah.
See, now I can do it.
So now that we're done with this episode of Tangent Piece Theater, let us get into the regular show. We will be talking about the films Something in the Dirt, or as I call it, Something in the Dirt. Name that tune. And also, I guess technically it's called Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Yes.
Although nobody is calling it that in life, but that's okay. But before we get into those movies, we want to tell you, hey, over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/spoilerpiece, we are talking about the 1992 comedy law courtroom movie, My Cousin Vinny, starring Marissa Tomei, really, and Joe Pesci. And Fred Gwynn and Ralph Macchio and Maury Chaykin and all these other people. And I had not seen it until very recently, and Evan and Megan have seen it a million times and love it. So we had a really good, fun, lively conversation about it. Yeah. And trivia, we're just going to tell you this. You probably already know this, but ask all your lawyer friends, and they will tell you it's the most accurate courtroom scenes they have ever seen in movies. And we covered it because why not cover a movie that's 30 years old? So,
yeah, exactly 30. Yeah.
But that's what Patreon is for. It's for covering the fun stuff. And here is the serious stuff. The serious new stuff. Something in the dirt. And Black Panther Wakanda Forever. We're going to do Something in the Dirt foist because I don't know, Wakanda Forever seems like this would be a bit of a, what would you call that? Anticlimactic if we did Something in the Dirt second. If only because it is a small, low budge. It's kind of a comedy. It's kind of a sci-fi movie. It's kind of a thriller. And it's by the filmmakers Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who they've directed. What do we say? They had directed a couple episodes of Moon Knight, right?
Yep.
And Synchronic, which we've covered on the show.
Synchronic, which we covered on the show. Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan, who I shit all over Jamie Dornan last week? I don't know.
You shit all over.
No, I said that
poor man's Jamie Dornan.
Poor man's Jamie Dornan. That was it.
Right. That guy. Yeah.
In the monster movie.
Not actually Jamie Dornan.
Right. So I remember feeling pretty good about Synchronic, except I thought the ending was not so great. I think, Megan, you were like, Synchronic, but Anthony Mackie was good.
Evan, Anthony Mackie is giving the performance of his life in that movie. He is amazing. Yeah. But I was not a huge fan of that movie, unfortunately.
Right. Evan, how did you feel? Do you remember?
I remember liking it and thinking it had a really great concept with kind of a flawed execution, but great performance by Anthony Mackie, which made me more engaged in it than I think I would have been otherwise.
Yeah. So anyway, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are also actors. They're not in Synchronic, but they're in a lot of the other things they make. And Justin Benson's the writer. They direct together, and I think Aaron Moorhead is the and they edit together too. That's what they do. So anyway, here's the one sentence summary from IMDb. Maverick filmmaking duo Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead offer up a twisted reflection of our paranoid times in this inventive mix of buddy comedy and sci-fi thriller, which is kind of how I described it when
Good job, Dave.
And I would say that's a fairly accurate, if vague, description of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You've got these two guys who are, can we call them losers? I mean, they're on the fringes of society.
Yeah.
That's a nicer way of putting it.
They live next to a highway on-ramp in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Never a good sign.
Right. The airplanes are always flying over. They live close to the airport.
Right. It looks like, so if you're LA and the plane's that low, it's like El Segundo or, something like that. But El Segundo is actually kind of nice, but whatever. So anyway, Justin Benson is the long-haired one, right? Yes.
I think so.
Yes. He's the long-haired one.
Yes,
and then the shaved head one is Aaron Moorhead. And
yes.
And Justin Benson, his character's name is
Levi.
And then Aaron Moorhead is John. I should just call them. I should just do what I always do, which is call them by their real names, because I'll never remember that. But anyway, Levi is like, he wakes up sleeping in this empty apartment, and it's and the first thing I thought is like, what the fuck is this? And I didn't realize that he had just moved in, but he goes outside.
I thought he was squatting maybe.
Yeah. He goes outside to do something. I don't even remember what he's going outside to do, but he sees John out there, and John claims to be a wedding photographer, and he's got this like strawberry syrup or cherry syrup all over his shirt. But Levi makes a joke like, well, I know you got to get to the hospital because your last surgery was like really bloody. I don't know what he fucking says. Something like he makes a joke about it being blood. But anyway, they strike up this kind of rapport with, talking about bullshit and smoking a lot of cigarettes. And then for some reason they're up in Levi's apartment, and then John sees this crystal ashtray just start floating in the air. And he's like, Levi, what the hell? And by the time Levi comes out of the kitchen, he's like, what's up? Like, it's back down, the weird, psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena has ended. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then it happens again, and they're like, whoa. And so they decide to document it and see if there's, they can make a documentary out of it, try to make some money, like sell it to Netflix or something like that. And, I mean, it just kind of takes off in this direction, is that it's not like they're double crossing each other, but John is definitely goosing it seems as if the phenomena is real, but John is goosing he's pushing the documentary in a particular direction with, he's Googling stuff, and he finds this book and all these patterns, and he just starts, saying, oh, it's this. And then they find that there's a number 1908, which is, that works into it. And their zip code works into it, and longitude and latitude works into it, and all these things. And the whole time I'm wondering, especially when you learn that John, who is, has an ex-husband named Lonnie who gives him money every month to live off of, I guess for alimony. I don't know exactly. But that's how John is funding his half of the documentary, where Levi is just kind of a loser and convicted sex offender and you're not sure whether the story he tells is true or not, that he was he was drunk and taking a piss, but it happened to be outside a daycare. Yeah. Like on a daycare's wall, which I don't know, mildly believable. They're both very unreliable narrators.
Right. They're lying to each other the entire time.
Yes.
Right.
I would kind of describe these two as stoners without the weed. they're guys who are like just they practice like a kind of stoner philosophy where it's like they get down these like rabbit holes of conversation where they're like philosophizing and like trying to make connections out of things to be profound, the kind of things that people say when they're like stoned. But they never smoke weed in this.
And we should mention that John is a member of an evangelical church which thinks the end of the world is imminent.
Yes.
So, and that works into the plot eventually. But there's all of these cutaways to, talking head interviews with other members of the production. Like one of the several editors they have, a visual effects supervisor, like this geologist who they have come and like look at soil samples to see if there's anything under the building, and
a chemist who's, I will add, is played by Sarah Adina Smith, who directed Buster's Malheart, which we talked about on this show.
I was going to bring that up. I'm so glad you did, Evan.
Yeah. She actually listened to the episode, believe it or not. She listened to our episode and like wrote us a nice little message.
Yeah. And so it just, things just, I mean, this is one of those movies that I think you kind of either buy into it or you don't. And I kind of bought, actually, you either buy into it or you don't. And then I'm going to say, like, I kind of bought into it. I'm a fucking idiot.
I wanted to buy into it. That's how I felt.
What's that?
I wanted to buy into this movie. I so badly wanted it to work for me. It just didn't.
Well, I think the problem is it's so talky. And I think that Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson are actually pretty fine performers, especially with each other. And it's mostly them. And you can tell that they have an easy back and forth with each other. They've worked with each other multiple times. They're friends, etc. They have a set pattern where Benson writes and they both direct and edit and this, that, and the other. But it's just, it gets so wacky, and there's such a point of that in the screenplay, there's such a point of not knowing what's true and what's not true, that after a while, it's just like, I don't really care what's true and what isn't. It's just like, can we have some kind of resolution? And it does have a hell of a resolution, as it turns out. But because, like I said, John is goosing all of these things, like planting these seeds, literally and figuratively, about, to push the ghost paranormal phenomena in a particular direction. But it seems that Levi keeps finding clues of his own that John couldn't possibly have a hand in planting that seem to be
like
true.
That skull.
Yeah, like
in
the skull.
Ocean.
And of course, one of them lives and one of them dies.
Yep.
And I think that actually kind of happens the way I feel like that's sort of the one thing that's concrete is John woke up hovering above his bed because, the place is, who knows what it is. I don't think it's haunted. There's something going on there. But Levi like floats out the window and floats into space, sort of. But he floats over this abandoned shack that they found out in the desert. And then, of course, gravity kicks back in and he falls to his death. And I think that did happen. But everything else, John, just as it turns out, is like kind of evil.
Yeah, he's manipulative and shitty and looks down on Levi he's so mean to him and insulting of his intelligence. There's that one scene where he's just laying into him. I mean, they're both kind of insulting each other, but he's on the offensive for the most of that scene.
Right.
John is against Levi.
Yeah. Yeah, I got I just sort of feel like Levi is one of those people who goes along to get along, whereas John is a shyster, like a natural born shyster, whereas Levi is just kind of like, hey, whatever, man. I don't know. Megan, you made a face when I said that.
Oh.
Do you not believe that? Or you have a different opinion? No. She's waving me off. Okay. So
my face was about something else. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well,
but I can tell you what I think if you'd like.
Yeah. I've yapped a lot, so I'd love to hear what you think.
So much like, I want to start. This is going to be a circuitous route. Our friend of the show, Andrew Crump, did an interview with Benson and Moorhead that was in the New York Times, and it was a great interview. And I think it was Moorhead talked about how their intention for this film was to show these two very flawed humans, but you start off kind of rooting for one of them, and then somewhere along the way that shifts, and you know, as you guys were talking about, you realize, you know, which one is it, John? Yeah, John's the evil one.
Moorhead.
Yeah, you realize that John is really the evil one, and he's really terrible. Which I like that. I think that's a great concept. And I read a lot of other people's reviews, and this has gotten rave reviews. And people talk about how this is such a mind fuck. It's so mind bending, and they love the paranoia and all of that. And listening to you guys talk about this film, if I hadn't seen it, I'd be like, whoa, you spoiler pieced me into it. This sounds fantastic. I think I've come to the conclusion that I am just, unfortunately, their ideas are great. I love that they're doing a lot of indie ideas, and they're kind of mavericks. They're doing their own style of filmmaking, and I think that's great. Mm-hmm. But I think that Benson and Moorhead, just their ideas just, they don't work for me, because this is the third film of theirs I've seen. The Endless was the first I saw. It's okay. It's a good idea. It's just okay for me. Synchronic, I wasn't a fan of, but Anthony Mackie loved. He was great. But again, like you said, Evan, it was a great premise. And here, same thing. I think it's a great premise. And you're right, Dave. They clearly have a rapport because they've known each other for so long and they work together so well. Mm-hmm. But this just, like you, Evan, I wanted this to work because this sounded so great. It sounded so weird. It has such great concepts, and I really love, I read this in Jason Bailey's review for the playlist. He talked about how the beginning of the film feels like really apocalyptic. And it's so true. Yes. Like, I thought we were going to be in the future in some kind of like dystopian world, because it does feel like, you know, with the blood and the airplanes overhead, like everything feels like it's terrible. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't go that route, but that's fine. But yeah, so I wanted to really love this, and it just sadly did not work for me. And I found myself kind of like my mind drifting away, and I found it really tedious, and I was bored, and I hate to say that, but I was. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me as to why it didn't work for me, Evan, is I don't like stoner humor. It's not my jam. It's not my thing at all. And I've been trying to pinpoint why this didn't quite work for me, and I think you really nailed it.
Oh,
and so
cool.
Yeah, so conceptually, I feel like this should work for me, because I love weird sci-fis, and I love talky films where it's just two people talking or multiple people talking. But yeah, this just sadly did not work for me. And I feel so bad saying that.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, I think it's, the stoner humor, I like. To me, that wasn't the biggest thing. I think the things that don't work for me are that I don't think they're good actors. So I think it's hard to hang a movie on two people who I think are maybe good writers and directors, but not good actors.
Right.
At least not in this. I don't feel like they're good. So it's hard to hang a movie on them. Like you, I found it tedious, slow, disjointed. I think one of the big problems for me is the way it kind of cuts between the, like, we're watching them in real time and then we're watching the like meta reenactment stuff. Mm-hmm. And just, I felt like the way that was cut together just never formed any consistency or rhythm to me. So it would jump around between that stuff. And I just found it just such a chore to get through.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you pretty much 100%. Definitely on the editing. Evan. I think that actually Benson I think his performance is quite fine. Moorhead, on the other hand, I never quite bought him. Maybe it's because as his character is not very good at, pretending to be a nice guy, but I don't think so. I just never really bought his performance, especially when he turned like 100% mean-spirited at the end. I'm just like, I just don't really believe this. Whereas I always kind of believed Levi. I don't know why. I liked his performance a lot more. In a way, this reminded me of a movie that I like a lot better. This reminds me of, I'm pretty sure you've seen this, Megan. Maybe you have too, Evan, is Shane Carruth's Primer.
I have not seen it.
Me of.
No, me neither.
Okay, well, it's a better movie. It's significantly shorter because Something in the Dirt clocks in at almost 2 hours, whereas Primer is about an hour 20. Now, And it's about two friends who accidentally make a huge fucking scientific discovery. And they sort of don't know what to do with it. I know this is spoiler piece, but I want you both to watch it, so I don't want to tell you what's going on. I don't even want to tell you what the scientific discovery is because,
I know what it is.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. No,
oh wait,
I'm not going to say it either.
He's terrible, isn't he? The really abusive.
See, now that's the thing. I
filmmaker?
heard that what is her name? That we like her, Amy Seimetz, right?
Yep. Yes.
That he was a shitbag to her. So,
yes.
That makes me kind of go, eh. But this movie, Something in the Dirt reminds me of Primer so much in the way, not the way the characters, I don't think they don't ever really turn on each other in Primer, but there is a big like mystery as to what the fuck is going on here, So that's part of the reason I was kind of interested to watch Something in the Dirt. And then it does have that sort of feel, but then I ended up having the most fun singing the melody to Something in the Way by Nirvana whenever I think about just singing that in my head whenever I think about this movie. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's the desired effect, So, although, you know what? I was just thinking now, when they're trying to come up with a title for the documentary, which they do very early in the movie, like 20 minutes in or so, you get a glimpse of John being a total shithead, the way he shoots down Levi's title like immediately.
Yep.
And then he tries to, and he's shitty about it. And then he tries to backtrack on it. And I should have paid more attention to that, because the more I think about it, the more there are clues almost from the beginning that John's just grimy. And Levi's just kind of like, to use your interpretation of it, Evan, he just kind of seems like a stoner who's never actually stoned.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do plenty of drinking in the
They do.
They drink a lot and they smoke a lot of cigarettes. So, and John never replaces Levi's beer, which that would piss me off too if I were a drinking man. So anyway, so that's Something in the Dirt. I know that people are going fucking bananas over this, like you said, Megan, but like, and it's fine. It's like, if this is your jam, then rock and roll. But I have kind of a hard time with conspiracy theories and things like that too, because I always just go back to the Charlie Day meme, and I don't like Charlie Day. So
such a great meme, though.
It's
It's so great. You know what I think part of it is? I mean, besides the fact that I'm sure people genuinely like this, I think part of it might be when you see so many films a year, as many film critics do, you just hunger for something different, something outside the traditional studio system. And I think that might have something to do with why people are latching on to this.
I'd buy that. Yeah. I don't know. I wish it were, I'm not going to say I wish it were better. I'm going to say I wish I liked it more.
Yeah, I agree. I wish it worked for me. It just didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those movies that I can definitely say, objectively, I think it's fine. It's just not for me, Yeah. So.
Although, to your point, Evan, I do wonder if it had two different actors in it, despite their great rapport amongst themselves. I do wonder if it had two maybe better actors, how it would land.
Yeah, I was thinking that because I watched it and I thought this movie should be working for me. And as I was watching it, I was just feeling so fatigued by it and thinking, I really want this. I want to be enjoying this more because I think it could. And it was just kept like trying to drill down into like, what is it that's not working for me? Yeah. And I realized it's the acting. Like the two leads, I'm not into them. So it's hard to enjoy the movie. And like we talked about, the editing, just not creating a suitable cadence.
the editing is really, I agree with you that it's disjointed, but it also does give a lot of clues to one or both of them being shitheads.
Yes.
For sure.
And you realize, of course, that John, if there's like a ratio, it's like 9-1. John is a shithead and Levi's just kind of like, I don't know, man. What do you think? I really think, and I don't think Levi is dumb. I think he's just not, he's not a grifter, the way that John is. So I don't know. Anyway, so I don't have anything else to say about Something in the Dirt. Anybody want to add anything?
No.
Other than I usually like really unique, weird sci-fi and talkie films, but yeah. Anyway.
Alrighty then. Let's move on to our second movie of the evening, which I accidentally closed the IMDb tab for. But it's Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, the latest entry in what phase
MCU?
is this? Phase 4 of the MCU.
It's phase 4.
Yes.
Directed by Ryan Coogler, written by Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole from A Coogler Story, starring Leticia Wright, Lupita Nyong'o, and everybody else from the first. Well, actually, I don't think Lupita Nyong'o wasn't in the first movie, right?
She was.
Oh, she was? Oh,
yep.
I don't remember that at all. And Winston Duke and Angela Bassett and Martin Freeman and, pretty much the same cast. And then there's the scientist.
Oh,
who's in
you mean
Letitia
Riri?
Wright?
Yeah.
No, you mean Riri Ironheart, who is Dominique Thorne.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, Michaela Cole is new. Tanak Huerta is new.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Oh, well, yes. I don't mean the bad, I don't mean the villain is, obviously he's new, but,
Oh, you said the scientist, so I thought you meant Riri.
Yeah, I thought
I did. No, I don't know. She's new too.
Yeah.
What I meant was everybody who was in the first one who didn't die and these new people, etc. Sorry, that was unclear.
Sorry, I derailed things. I was confused. I apologize.
That's okay. There's a lot of fucking characters in this movie.
There are.
And this is obviously the aftermath of Chadwick Boseman's untimely death, and so now we know where the franchise is going, or at least where they thought it had to go this time around. I think Wakanda Forever is now. I should just throw out this as I do, or I try to remember to do each time we watch a Marvel movie. These movies have to be outstandingly stupendous for them to have any sort of effect on me, because they're just kind of all there as far as I'm concerned. I kind of like Iron Man. I like Iron Man 3. I think I'm the only person who liked Age of Ultron.
Maybe.
Oh.
And Civil War I like a lot. Civil War I think is the MCU movie I like most.
Really? I did not.
Not Winter Soldier?
Not Civil War, Winter Soldier. You're right.
Oh,
You're right. I got it wrong.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's most people's favorite of the...
And I generally speaking like the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, except the second one's kind of dog shit. But
Tom Holland is so great.
Yeah, but that's 5 movies out of how many? 25? I don't know.
Oh my God, more. And now there's the series and
Right.
Which I've seen none of those. So the first time that Martin Freeman showed up, I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And they're like, don't you watch whatever? I'm like, no, I don't.
No.
He was in the last one.
Yeah,
So
he's in The Office. That's all I know him from, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So anyway, long story short, Leticia Wright becomes the new Black Panther. Which is exactly what you would think. They're not going to bring in some fucking rando to be, Black Panther, right?
No, but Evan and I, we talked about this because this was the first time all three of us were together since pre-COVID, which is kind of amazing at the screening. And Evan and I were hoping, although I knew it wasn't going to happen, but we were hoping it was going to be Angela Bassett, who is the new Black Panther, which would have been amazing because Angela Bassett is a badass and she's incredible.
Right. She was the queen, and it just felt like that would have been a really, even if it was temporary, even if the movie opened and they're like, she's just been the fill-in Black Panther until, Shuri can get her shit together and take over the mantle. I would have been okay with that. But sadly, no.
No, we were denied.
No.
So like a lot of Marvel movies, this one is just kind of there for me. I think some of the editing in this and some of the story decisions were fucking piss poor.
Oh, I don't agree.
Well, I think that, if you're going to kill, I think that if you're going to kill Lake Bell, you should do it on screen because she's a big enough name and they just kind of the first time, what are the underwater people called? What do they call themselves?
Talakamil.
The Talokan.
Right. Namor's people. Let's just, go with that. The first time that you see them, they kill a bunch of, spies doing spy shit. And they turn this Lake Bell and I think it's Robert John Burke are in a helicopter and they're flying away and they think they're getting away. And then the Namor's people get the helicopter and they're dragging it back towards this ship in the middle of the ocean. And then they just kind of fling it off and you don't see, and you're just like, what happened to Lake Bell? Well, obviously, unless they bring her back in the next movie, because maybe they do.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like she's dead.
We never see a body, so who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should give a little bit more context to the story.
I agree.
Though.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this story, though. Which is
but I think the central ideas are Black Panther T'Challa dies in the beginning off screen, and
as they should have done. Yeah.
Yeah. His sister tries desperately to save his life and is not able to. So she's haunted by that grief. We see them having his funeral, mourning him. It's a year later now, and other parts of the world are seeing Wakanda as a vulnerable nation because the Black Panther's not there to protect it. So they're trying to steal their vibranium. And so the Wakandans are basically trying to stand up for themselves and make sure people don't get vibranium. And then at the same time, while, the Lake Bell and the spies are searching for vibranium somewhere else with the machine that's built by the scientists we meet later, or a MIT student, they encounter the Talokan people who are led by Namor, who is he's basically like part man, part god. He describes himself as a mutant. And he leads this group of people who live underwater, and they also have vibranium, and they're kind of like very similar to the Wakandans in that they live this isolated existence and they are safe living deep underwater away from people. But now that, their space is being invaded, they feel like they have to defend themselves. And so they go to Wakanda and say, hey, we're both in the same boat here. We need to team up. And if you don't team up, we're just going to come at you because we can't have you as an adversary. And we need to just go after the surface people and conquer them all. Because otherwise we're never going to be safe.
Yeah, Namor's big plan is to basically destroy every nation in the world except for Wakanda and his. Which, if you think about sort of global scale, it's not quite snapping the fingers, but it's not far off. So
right. Well, I mean, and also his people's story comes from a place of trauma. They're Mayan roots. Basically, they're a group of people that found this special plant that was growing in vibranium underwater, and then they ate it, and then they could breathe underwater, and so they were able to escape the colonizers and form their own epic society underwater. And so they've carrying around this trauma of colonizing invaders and disease and stuff, and just seeing everyone else as an outsider, as a threat that's trying to destroy their way of life.
Yep. And eventually Leticia Wright is like, no, we're not going to work with you, handsome fish man. and he's not a fish. And
no, but M'Baka calls him a fish man.
That's true.
Yeah, he does.
So Namor comes after Wakanda. Kind of interestingly, though, this is something I did like. I didn't love that they killed off Angela Bassett and gave her just kind of a shitty death. Also, there's a lot of shitty deaths in this movie.
That was surprising. They killed her.
They drown her, but the interesting thing about that scene is when Namor says, I'll give you 1 week to mourn your losses and bury your dead. And if you don't join me by the end of that week, I'm going to come back and wipe you out, which is convenient plot wise because it gives the Wakandans a week to figure out what they're going to do. But I also just thought that was kind of an interesting idea. It's like, you get to mourn your losses and bury your dead. I'm just kind of like, so he's a bastard, but he's a respectful bastard.
Yeah. I was like, I actually found him, interestingly, I found him a very interesting villain because I didn't actually see him as a villain. I saw him very much. I saw him very similar to Killmonger, which is funny because Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger shows up in a surprise cameo. But I found him, I don't think, I really like a lot of superhero movies But others like you, Dave, I'm kind of like, they're just there, whatever. But the thing I liked about Black Panther so much was Killmonger was such an interesting antagonist. And I didn't really see him as a villain because I'm like, yeah, he's combating colonialism. I'm here for that. And that's what Namor is doing is, I mean, granted, he's using very violent tactics, but he's combating colonialism and protecting his people. And I'm here for that. So, I mean, I don't think he should be wiping out Wakanda, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get what his problem is. I'm not really mad at him. And plus, I mean, Tenoch Huerta Mejia is just such a fantastic actor. I love him in that role. He's so good. So good.
I forgot we had seen him in Madres, which I really liked.
Did. I've seen him in a bunch of things, actually. I've seen him in Madres. I've seen him in Tigers Are Not Afraid. I've seen him in, Dave and I saw him in The Forever Purge. He's great. He is always magnetic.
He's quite handsome, I must say.
Oh my God. I know. I don't normally talk about people, like actors' looks on the show.
Oh, I got another actor to talk about.
God, I could not stop staring. I mean, Angela Bassett is a gorgeous queen,
she's
of course.
Yeah.
But I could not stop staring at her, and I could not stop staring at Tenoch Huerta Mejia's legs. His thighs are so muscular, and he is quite handsome.
Yeah.
But he's so magnetic. I just love him.
He is. He's a very charismatic performer, and he gives a very charismatic performance here.
Yes.
Well, he needs to. This villain needs to be charismatic.
Like Killmonger. He has to be persuasive.
Work. Exactly.
And I like that about this movie. I like that they go to the well again and look at someone who makes a good point. They're not just a simple, I want to take over the world villain. They have a perspective, and where they clash with the Wakandans is that they don't agree on the same methods.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's why I like that he comes in and he takes people out, but is like, this is a warning shot that I'm firing here because I don't want to wipe you guys out. I see you as allies. We have so much in common. We really should be working together. And this is my kind of way of saying, I'll make the tough choices, but I really don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It provides a lot of complexity and nuance, which is something we don't get often enough with antagonists or villains. And it's quite refreshing in that way. But I think my big problem with this film is, and I've read this in multiple reviews, and this is so true. Knowing this going in, I think Ryan Coogler had kind of an impossible job, because how do you make a sequel to a superhero film that's so beloved, in part because Chadwick Boseman is so beloved, and you can't move forward with that same character and performer, obviously. And how do you show that? And so I think there's a great review that is in Vulture that Angelica Jade Bastian wrote about how it's like trying to be everything to everyone, and for her it didn't work. And I tend to agree with that. But I think my big problem is that, but also Letitia Wright and her performance. And for me, it just didn't work, because the whole movie is sitting on her, and it hinges on her in many ways, because Ryan Coogler said, like, she's kind of the audience surrogate in the first Black Panther, and she's kind of she's the center of the film in this one, and we're following her journey and narrative arc of grief and how she can't mourn, and then she turns to vengeance after the death of her mother, and then she wants to wipe out and murder Namor.
That all comes pretty quick, by the way, that transition.
Exactly. Oof. It's like, it's so fast. It's like, what it reminded me of the final season of Game of Thrones with Dany, and how she's like such a benevolent ruler, and then all of a sudden she's like, no, I'm going to torch all of King's Landing with my dragons and murder innocent people. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. What? That happened in like one episode. No, we need a longer arc. And that's how I felt with Shuri. I was like, no, we need more time for her to turn to vengeance or more emotional resonance, something. And so her performance just didn't work for me here. What I will say, though, is that the ending, when she's sitting in silence at the beach and we're getting flashbacks of her and Chadwick Boseman in the first Black Panther, I was sobbing at that. And not just because of Chadwick Boseman, because of course you can't not cry, or maybe not cry, but you can't not be emotional. But I think it was so fantastically edited, that particular scene, in a way that the rest of the film, I think, is not as well edited. And I think it feels very disjointed. But that
super choppy.
Right? So choppy. But that end sequence, I think, is just superb and really, really is such a beautiful culmination of moving through grief and the different stages of grief and finally accepting it and coming to terms with it, which is a really, really beautiful thing.
Yes, it is. I think the movie is very effectively bookended that way. It opens with, his character dying. We see them, mourning his loss. And then we see the entire Marvel Studios logo is dedicated to him. I got really choked up during those opening scenes.
It was actually kind of touching. I was surprised. I mean, I don't know what I expected them to do, but it was a rather somber yet touching surprise to see him. But it also, unfortunately, watching this movie, I'm like, boy, does this movie need fucking Chadwick Boseman?
Right?
I didn't really realize until watching this just what a big screen presence he was in everything, Because I remember when I saw 42, I'm like, who the fuck is Chadwick Boseman? And then I think that movie's kind of like, but his performance is great.
He's so good. So good in it.
And he's good in Marshall and even that terrible cop movie that he was in with J.K. Simmons. He's great. So it really leaves a big hole in the franchise, I think, without him. And some other stuff that didn't work. Like the humor, all of the humor fell flat for me.
Oh, yeah.
Just really bad. Because the scientist, Riri is supposed to kind of be comic relief. But there's no character development for her. And all of a sudden she's flying around like Iron Man. And there's just all of these things that happen with her. And you're just supposed to roll with the idea that there's this 19-year-old MIT genius, which, okay, I'm sure that's totally possible. But that she, in her stepfather's, the way the way that she explains how she comes up with everything, it's so clearly not written by somebody who understands engineering or physics or science or doesn't care to explain it if they do understand it. Yeah, everything that takes place in Cambridge, which is kind of nice to see that they actually did shoot some of it in Cambridge.
Right?
Not a lot, but some of it.
Too.
Yeah, the local angle.
I never knew that there was a huge fucking production here, but there was apparently. Well, you know what? Because it happened during COVID. They shot it during COVID.
Exactly.
So,
and it was at night.
Yeah, and it were night shoots. One thing that did work for me a lot was, and I talked with you about this a little. I talked with this Lupita Nyong'o. Her character arc worked for me in this. I don't remember her from the first movie at all. But the other thing about this was I've always thought that she's, attractive, but she is so stunningly beautiful in this movie. She's actually kind of hard to look at because she's distracting. She's so beautiful. It's just I can't really pay attention to what she's saying because I'm just looking at her face going good God, how is anybody that gorgeous? So... And I don't usually talk about how beautiful people are on the podcast either.
No,
but
we don't typically go into it, but she has such great wardrobe in this that I feel like she almost pops off the screen in sections because you're just that is such an amazing color on her. She's wearing this suit at some part in the movie where she's a spy and she's got to infiltrate the Talokans, and you're just oh my God, that's such an amazing color on her. That's what I was thinking.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Evan, because I was going to talk about that because that is from the legendary Ruth Carter, costume designer who also worked on Black Panther. And in the production notes, she talks about why she went with that color. She talks a lot about the colors for Letitia Wright's outfits. And there is so much thought put in and intentionality put into the entire color palette of this film and the costumes. It's just incredible. But you're right. That blue-green suit that she's wearing to go underwater is it's stunning. And she's stunning. And it just is great.
Radiates off the screen. You're oh my God, who picked that color? Because they found the best color for her to wear.
Yes. And especially off of her red hair. Because they were saying that like they wanted to keep her red hair from the first film, but because she's been away from Wakanda, they wanted to transition her hair into locks. And yeah, anyway, it's such a great color contrast, and yes, it's so striking. And but anyway, I digress.
It's funny. I was going to say how charismatic she is, but the fact that I don't remember her performance from the first movie at all makes me wonder, is she? But I don't really remember. Like, for example, I don't remember somebody was like, the way your brother let Killmonger take over the throne. I'm like, wait, what? That happened? And then I thought about it. I'm like, oh yeah, it did. They had whole fight in the water and everything. But I had no memory of that, so I don't really think it's necessarily, like I said, these movies are just kind of there for me. Although I did like Black Panther more than a lot of Marvel movies, largely because of Chadwick Boseman. But the other thing about Lupita Nyong'o's performance is like every time she's on screen, especially when she's on screen with Letitia Wright, which is not very often, but it does happen. You kind of realize just Letitia Wright just doesn't have the presence, which I don't know if that's her fault. I don't know if it's the screenplay. I don't think the screenplay is doing her character a lot of favors. What like the million different things they have her doing, mourning Black Panther, becoming an action hero, inventing all of this stuff. Also being her own comic relief. Just like she's wearing a lot of hats.
She is, but I think you nailed it, and I don't think it is fully the script. I think it is at least partially her, because when you see her acting against Angela Bassett and Denai Guerrera, both of who are so amazing in their acting abilities, especially Angela Bassett, but Denai Guerrera, have loved her for like a decade. They're just so good, and they're imbuing their characters with so much charisma, complexity in such a short time without a lot of dialogue or anything, that I feel like you're right. Letitia Wright does have a lot on her shoulders and a lot she has to pull off. So I think part of it's a script, but I think a big part of it is just her. I don't know. I just don't think this is the right role for her or something, because it just didn't work. It doesn't all come together.
She does feel like the weak link in the chain.
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit, a lot more than both of you. I really dug this movie quite a bit. You know how I feel about longer movies. This movie actually did hold my attention the entire time. I was not fidgety at all.
For all 161 minutes?
Yeah. Okay. It held me at rapt attention. I think its opening was very emotional. That sucked me in. I liked that this story was a very female-centric story. Like we have all of our main characters are women in this, and you get like a couple of men thrown in there, but I like that it's their story. It's their thing that they have going on. I agree with you guys. I think Letitia Wright is the weakest link of them, which is difficult when she's the lead of the movie and needs to carry a lot of that weight. But I found this story particularly compelling. I thought the villain was compelling, as we've discussed, Namor. I loved seeing his kingdom, the underwater kingdom with the sun, the way he's able to replicate the sun down there.
It's amazing.
I just thought that was incredible. All of the art direction, the score was so epic and atmospheric. Ludwig Göransson's score with this, he seems to be really good at this like vocalization, where it's like there are people who are using vocals as like a musical element. That's the best way I can describe it. If anyone's seen The Mandalorian and knows the Mandalorian score, you can kind of get what I mean. So I loved that about the movie. I love the performances in this. I was talking about this afterwards with Kristen Halpert, who's been on the show. And we were just talking about this idea that like you're watching the characters mourn Chadwick Boseman's passing, but you're also watching the people mourn the actors. And for me, it feels so raw and so emotional and so real that I was just like, I know I was watching, she described it as people grieving in costume, and which I found a very effective way to describe it, because you're watching these people who have to do double duty, and it just feels so real that they're grieving someone that they knew and loved in real life, and this character that was such a magnetic presence. And I was so wrapped up in that, in addition to what I thought was another compelling villain, and a story a lot about, the eye for eye, vengeance makes the world go blind. I do think that it gets a little bit heavy in the glorifying the violence when she rips off the wing on Namor's leg. Oh, I thought that was so graphic and so horrifying. And I felt like I know the movie's point is that this is wrong and we don't want to do this, but it felt like the movie was getting a little too into it. That's like one of my critiques, is that I was a little bit uncomfortable with how much it seemed to be glorifying the violence.
I really agree with you on that scene. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Evan, because it kind of reminded me on a much smaller scale, but it reminded me of Maleficent and when her wings are ripped off, which is a rape allegory. When she rips his wings off, I'm like, oh, that feels like a violation. And it was disgusting and disturbing. And, it also kind of reminded me, all three of us are huge fans of The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2. And, we love that love and hate that final scene where you're forced to Ellie and Abby are battling, and it's like, I don't want to do this. And it kind of reminded me of that in a way. Like, I don't want this person to do this because I like this. Right. I like Namor. But so I agree with you, and I don't dislike this. I haven't actually expressed the things I do like, except for the costumes and some of the performances. But I agree with you, Evan. There's a lot of good ideas here. And I also love that it's women-centric, and that was a very intentional decision by Ryan Coogler. He said that there were so many father-son dynamics in the first film. He wanted to focus on mother dynamics and motherhood really being the crux of this film. And even Namor is, he talks about his mother, and I love that his mother is portrayed by the lead from La Llorona, which she is such a great film, and she gives such a great performance. So it was nice seeing her here. And I love that too. I think, and I agree with you and Kristen too, that you are definitely seeing the actors grieve on screen. That's not my problem. My problem is it comes down to, I think, the editing and again, trying to do too much. I think if the film, and it's hard to do in an MCU film because, they want to do bigger, they want to do bolder, they want more. But I think if you scaled back a bit and made it smaller or, more contained, or if the editing was different and the characters were given room to breathe, the way Shuri is in the last scene, I think for me anyway, I would feel the weight of their grief more. And when I'm watching it, I'm seeing snippets of that. I'm seeing snippets of the characters and the actors grieving. But it's like, as soon as I get an emotional resonance and feel the grief, it's like, oh, now we're going to have a bad joke. Oh, now we have to cut to this. Oh, now we got to cut to this. And it's just much like how Letitia Wright has so much on her shoulders and so many hats she's got to wear. That kind of was for me the film, is that I liked this. I was into it. I love the performances. I like that it's trying to tackle grief, and grief is such a fascinating, complex topic and emotion, but it just, I think there are elements that detracted for me, that it made it, not that I disliked it, but it just wasn't as good as I think it could have been.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I was going to talk about one of the things that I did like, which I think I mentioned to you, Megan.
The underwater sequences?
The underwater sequences are really great, and also the way that the Wakandans choose to fight the Namor's people. I'm not going to try to pronounce anything. By building what is basically Noah's Ark and standing on top of it, and throwing all the warriors down the side, but holding them by ropes.
Yeah, that fight scene was incredible.
That fight scene. One of the shortcomings I think all of these movies have, whether it's DC or MCU or whatever, it's just like eventually you get a lot of large, strong people beating the shit out of each other, which is not so interesting, especially by the 25th time you've seen it. But this was really a good and unique way to kind of alter some of the fight scenes, and particularly that last one when Letitia Wright is Black Panther and she's like using her claws to like go down the side of the ship and kick off Namor's people, and you've got everybody else on top like doing X, Y, and Z. And I thought that the fight between Letitia Wright and Namor was, I didn't have the same reaction to the wings that you both did, but when he impaled her, I was kind of like, well, I don't know how she's going to recover from that shit. But at the same time, I was kind of distracted by how much they kept, because they keep hammering home the point once they finally figure out what Namor's weakness is, which is to get him out of the water because his skin needs moisture and he's going to start drying out. They keep hammering home, we got to keep him dry. We got to go to the desert. We got to do this. And then even after he's nearly lost this fight, he's like, I need water. And it's like, just shut the fuck up. I mean, honestly, if you haven't figured it out by now, you're not going to figure it out, So I found that just fucking tedious. But I always have a problem with, I'd rather have and you can't do this in an MCU movie. This is not like a realistic thing they could do, but I would rather have my violence be violent than bloodless,
Yes, I agree with you.
This is almost all bloodless because it's PG-13, and it just kind of like, think about all the other times you've seen someone impaled in a movie, but the movie's rated R.
Yep.
And that's just, I don't know, pretty fucking gnarly. But here she just like she breaks off the tip of the spear and then like walks through it, which by the way, you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to pull it out. But, it's just like, it's kind of icky. But that one big fight sequence I did like a lot. And I also, this movie though has a problem that a lot of the MCU movies do, which, you've got so much computer graphic CGI, that some of it's really great. And some of it's just like, this movie cost $300 million and this is what you got out of it. And I don't know if it's because it's going to different effects houses because, there's so much that you've got to employ like lots of different effects houses, which is usually what ends up happening. I didn't pay any attention to the closing credits here. And you can tell which scenes they were more interested in making look really good. So it's a little disjointed's not the right word for that. It's a little, the CGI is a little mushy. Let me put it that way. I don't know. And I don't think that I really disliked this. I was just kind of like, it's not, I mean, it's better than any of the Doctor Strange movies. I'll say that. But, this is just one of those Marvel movies that's just kind of there for me. It's not good or bad. It's just kind of like, oh, we're advancing the story, And I that being said, I think given the challenge that Ryan Coogler and presumably the producers and the actors, et cetera, were faced with, pretty admirable job, but it still doesn't quite hang together for me.
Yeah. Well, didn't they also have the challenge? Didn't eventually Letitia Wright get booted off of this movie because she's like wildly anti-vax or something like that? Like they clearly got a complete story out of it, I feel like, but the way that they kind of left it at the end, that she's like grieving on an island and M'Baku is like going to claim the throne in Wakanda, I thought was an interesting way to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, she is super anti-vax. I don't know if she's booted, maybe, and that ending would make sense. But I also think it's strange if that ending was because of that to then hinge so much on her. So, which almost makes me think she wasn't booted, but who knows?
But they set up for like Black Panther Jr. to take things over. So
that's true. They did, which is a little sad for me because even if it was not Letitia Wright, or even though it is, I'm very excited whenever we get women superheroes because it does not happen nearly enough. And I love that we have not just one, but two Black women superheroes in this because Riri becomes Ironheart. At least she is in the comics. And I know there's a series coming to Disney Plus where she's going. It's like a 6-episode series about her. So we have her, and then we have Shuri as Black Panther. So I'd love it to stay a woman Black Panther, but who knows?
Yeah, let's make Nakia Black Panther. I'm
right.
Okay with that too.
I would love that. I love that's Denai Guerrero, right?
No, Lupita Nyong'o.
Lupita Nyong'o. Yes.
I kind of thought she was going to become Black Panther,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, something we haven't even talked about, and I know there's a lot to discuss in this film. Speaking of women in this film, I think this film criminally underutilizes Michaela Cole, who is a great actor, also a great writer. And we barely see her in this. And I was excited for her character because I had seen her in interviews talking about, yes, I am a queer character. That's why I signed up for this film, to be a queer Black woman in this film. A character, and I was like, yes, this is great. And all we get is a brief little kiss between her and Florence Kasumba, which is great. Listen, I'm here for any queerness we get in any way, shape, or form. But I'm like, really? We don't even learn about her. We don't really get anything except she likes to fight with knives that Shuri created instead of the traditional Dora Milaje spear. Yeah. So again, I think that for me, this just speaks to, I think this film is trying to be too much, but I do like that we're getting representation. I like that we're getting Indigenous Mexican representation. That's nice. And there's some great performances in this. And the ending is spectacular.
It is. Yeah. And I'm like, at least the queer people share the screen in this one. They're not like the Russo brothers being like, we just, let's take a bow for representation. We had a guy in a therapy scene said he had a husband.
Yeah. Listen, I'm getting tired though of these. That's very true. I'm getting tired though of these big movies being like, we've got a queer character, we've got some queer characters, and then it's like blink and you miss it, and it's like, it's like the queer baiting is real, people, and it's very frustrating. But yes, at least we get to see them. We see some affection between the two women. Yes, I'm here for that. I just wish we got
share
more.
The same screen.
Yes, they did, which is nice. It's hard to juggle all of these things. And I think it's also hard when you do have so many people working on one film, which speaks to your point, Dave, about like with the special effects in so many houses. But but I will tell you, when the parts of this film work, it really hits and it really works.
The parts that work, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Killmonger's cameo fucking works, Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Yeah,
like
it was
great.
His
3 minutes on screen, you're like, man, does he have my attention?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When she figures out how to synthesize the heart-shaped herb and takes it, and you're just like, oh, fuck, Killmonger is who she's going to see. Because it was like, we know she's not going to see Chadwick Boseman. Nope. So who's she? She's going to see him. And he's going to be like, go get revenge.
Yeah. Yep. But then she does see her mother eventually. So
yeah.
Yeah. And what I would deem an acid flashback, because she's off of the heart-shaped herb at that point. So I feel like it's just kind of like a momentary hallucination.
Yeah. That's right.
Good question.
I don't know.
Or is she so tapped into her ancestors and powers that she's seeing her mother outside of it? Who knows?
Ooh.
I know.
Good question. Wow. A question we will not be able to answer, I don't think.
No. But there is so much that's working well with this film. Yeah, it's just, anyway, I could keep going because there's a lot to unpack here.
Well, there is a lot to unpack, but, I'm done unpacking. So if either of you has anything else to say, feel free. But I've hit my Wakanda. I don't know. It's there is a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in this for a superhero movie.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add is I went down a rabbit hole learning about Namor, or as his character name has been traditionally pronounced, Namor. And his backstory involves him like being an Atlantean that lived. I'm really glad they retooled his character and made him like Mesoamerican and called him Namor. Like
yes,
just going down a rabbit hole of learning about this character and his history as kind of an anti-hero / ally, who has worked with the Wakandas before. I was reading in one of the comic series. I like that they retooled his backstory. They retooled his character and made him much more interesting, in my opinion. Oh, sorry. And the last thing is, apparently he's called the Submariner. I'm glad they did not use the name the Submariner.
Yeah,
I'm glad they jettisoned that.
That's terrible. Terrible.
That's bad.
Yeah, I love that we learn, like when he's like, oh, my name is Kukulkan. And he's like, but he's like, my enemies call me Namor. And I love that the reason he gets it is from the priest saying to him, Niño sin amor, which is child without love. I love that. That's so great.
That's
I love that
pretty clever.
Right? Like, I love that he embraces that. And he's like, that insult, that curse essentially you're giving me, I'm going to wear that as a mantle. Yeah. Which, it just speaks to, I can't wait actually to see the next one, or if they do their own film, because I feel like we don't learn enough about, the Telecanal, and I want to learn more about the capital city, and I want to learn more about the people, and I want to learn more about Namor's, favorite soldiers and his warriors. Like, I just want to learn more about the place because I feel like we get such a quick overview of it. So,
they set it up for them to return, though.
Totally. There's just But yeah, this is great performances, visually stunning, interesting antagonist, beautiful ending with some kinks along the way.
Yeah. Alrighty then. Well, we talked a lot about Wakanda Forever. We talked a lot about something in the dirt. And that, as they say, is that for this week's episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. As you'd have to be living under a rock not to know that Wakanda Forever is out now in theaters and is expected to be huge. Something in the Dirt is going to be out in theater, or is out in theaters on the 16th? Question mark? Or it's out now. I can't remember exactly. But it'll be around. It's just
release now.
In limited release. Yeah. So that's where you can find those movies. Sorry. I wasn't very clear on that, but it happens sometimes. I want to thank I want to thank our editor, Otto Clamor. Otto, thank you for making me and not sound like a dope every week, and for making Megan and Evan sound as wonderful as they always are.
Aw, thanks, Dave. And thank you, Otto. We love you.
Shucks. Thanks, Otto.
Yeah. You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you can get podcasts. If you want to go to our website, that's spoilerpiece.com. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you'd like to email us, get in touch, and tell us all of the things that I missed about Wakanda Forever, or all of the things we as a group missed about Something in the Dirt, you can do that, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
And let us know what you think of X, Y, and Z. Or if you're a patron, let us know what you think of our talking about My Cousin Vinny this week, which, brief reminder, over on our Patreon, we talk about My Cousin Vinny. Each week we have extra episodes. And if you're a $5 a month patron and up, you get access to all those episodes. There's nearly 300 now. You get to vote in polls, et cetera, et cetera. Patreon.com/spoilerpiece. Yay!
Woohoo!
If you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece, or you can rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out. And if you really, really like the show, as I just said, please consider joining our Patreon. And my name is Dave Riedel. I write and I talk about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, I'm Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a member of BAFTA and Gallica, and you can follow me on Twitter, at least for now, at OpinionS World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
Oh yeah, I should asterisk Twitter also for me. For now.
It's a question mark.
Yeah.
Anyway. Deck chairs on the Titanic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Been an honor and a privilege.
Yeah. All right, gang. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.